Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Garfield from the Brother Garfield podcast. Today I have a special guest. His name is Remy Ilona. If I mispronounce his name, he will correct me. And for those who are not familiar with Remy Ilona, he's a PhD candidate, a researcher, historian, scholar of religion. He's presently at the UC Riverside, California. Previously, Remy was at the Florida International University in Miami, Florida, and was an attorney and law lecturer in Nigeria. Remy is also, at the present time, chairman and secretary general of Ominana Defenders and a staunch activist in both the Igbo Jewish community, in general, the Igbo community at large. He's widely regarded and respected as Nigeria's top Hebraist Bible scholar and cultural theorist. His work on the unique parallels between Ominana, the Hebrew, Jewish, Samaritan, Karaite cultures, and exegesis on the Bible has sent scholars interested in the above-mentioned areas back to the drawing board. His works and Israeli anthropologist Dr. Daniel Liss were pivotal and critical in Obadiah Alliance's Sephardic Jewish religious court's ruling that Igbos are lineal descendants of the Israelites. In addition to Yona's public engagements and incisive discussions on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, he's also a very prolific essayist and writer, having authored and published 20 books, among which are Igbo Religion and Culture, Hebrew Igbo Republics, Culture, Religion, and DNA, Igbos and Abraham's DNA, and African American History from Israel through Africa to the Americas, and the Igbos in Israel, an intercultural study of the oldest and largest Jewish diasporas. Ladies and gentlemen, let me present to you. It's an honor to bring to you Remy Ilona. How are you doing today, my brother?
Fine, my brother. I'm doing fine.
All right. One of the books that I just observed that I was just reading about is one with the connection of the Igbos of African Americans. I think is that your latest book, the one about African Americans?
No, I produced it in 2019, and it bears the title African Americans because I had to compress the title. Is essentially the journey of many African Americans and many Caribbeans from the land of Israel through West Africa to the New World.
Okay.
If I had space on the title, it would have also captured the centrality of the Caribbean discussion, Israelite discussion on the cover. So it's about African Americans and also Caribbean Israelites and Igbo journey.
Mm-hmm. A lot of folks in the African American community are skeptical about the whole argument. Some are for it, some are against it. And today I'm trying to have a balanced conversation where you're like a first-hand guy who has been the major guy at the forefront of pushing the Igbos and a connection with African Americans and Igbos connection to the Hebrews of the past and so forth. I want to first and foremost commend you for your being basically the trailblazer for years, like I called you out in the questions. So as a trailblazer for years for the Igbo Jewish Hebrew connection, how did you get started on this particular journey? What kind of set you off in that direction?
Thank you. This is what I decided to make my life's work. Is my lived experience. It's something we are living every day. We live as Israelites. The culture we practice is Israelite culture. Everything about how we live is Israelite. Our origin stories are Israelite. Our laws and traditions are Israelite. Our games are Israelite. But when I got to a certain stage in life, I discovered that because of our colonial experience, which essentially took away our power to tell our stories ourselves, and this elephant in the room that I keep on calling out, racism and anti-Semitism, which we are victims of. This story was being suppressed, denied, obfuscated. So 20 years ago, I took a leave from my legal practice and began to document our traditions so that our people who live this tradition of Israel every day, we really understand that it is Israelite traditions they are practicing when they do things they do every day. I will give you an example. When COVID came up in the world and everybody began to talk about washing hands, washing hands, washing hands, why do we need to why do we need to advise people to wash hands if everybody in the world was washing hands before they ate? We had to tell people to wash hands because it is not religion and culture for most people in the world to wash their hands before they eat. But the first thing an Igbo man does or an Igbo woman does in the morning is to wash the hands. And before an Igbo man eats even bananas, an Igbo man must wash the hands. And before the Igbo man eats, even in the Western countries where people eat with knife and fork, compulsively he has to wash the hands. And this is Israelite traditions. But the average Igbo thinks that everybody in the world does that. So it became necessary to begin to write these things down so that the Igbos will understand what they are doing. Because if you are practicing a tradition without knowing its history and culture, without knowing its history, over time you will become lackadaisical. You will become lax and you will lose the tradition. Like another example, the Igbos possess the world's largest business incubator platform. World's largest business incubator platform. In other words, the Igbos are the #1 startup nation in the world. Nation, I don't mean state. The state of Israel has also been described as a startup nation, but I think it will come first if we are talking about groups that have managed to become states. But if you are talking about nations that may not be states, Igbos start more businesses than every other group in the world. It was an American that went to Nigeria, did the research, and came up with the findings that Igbos built the largest business incubator platform in the world. How many Igbos living today know that what they do is rooted and centered in the Hebrew Bible? Only very few, but they do it every day. I will tell you what we do. The Hebrew Bible says, when your brother, a Hebrew, becomes poor, he shall come and live with you. On the 7th year, you shall set him free, but you shall also give him provisions as he's living. This is what is behind the Igbo business success. This is what the Igbos use to produce that largest business incubator platform. But Igbos did not know that it was their tradition, which the writers of the Hebrew Bible wrote down. So, because this tradition, the history of this tradition is not well known to the present generation, it is not being respected as it should be. These are some of the reasons that impelled me over 20 years ago to begin to do what I'm doing, to write down these traditions and to call the Igbos back, to call their descendants in the Caribbean and in the African American world back. Some are in Gabon, some are in Sierra Leone, to begin to tell them, go back to your traditions. Your traditions are the traditions that the authors of the Hebrew Bible cited. Thank you.
Okay. To follow up to that, are you, well, you know what? Let me go in the same order. Is the claim a bloodline claim or is it partially a conversion claim for the Igbos?
The jury has returned its result. I'm referring to the jury now because I cannot be a judge in my own cause in this case. We know who we are. Our traditions scream we are Israelites. Our name screams we are Israelite. Igbo is simply the word Hebrew. But a jury constituted not by Igbos have taken a look at the entire matter and they passed their judgment. Daniel Lees, Swiss-Israeli anthropologist and Ashkenazi Jew, conducted one of the most compelling modern histories of the Igbos, and he was definitive that the traditions of the Igbos are definitely Israelite. And then Obadiah Alliance, a Sephardic Jewish Bedin, constituted a Sephardic Jewish Bedin headed by a rabbi who has a PhD, well respected in Jewish circles. They embedded themselves in the Igbo community, observed the Igbos one-on-one, and after they gathered all the information available, studied them, and in February 2022, they ruled that Igbos are lineal descendants of the biblical Israelites. And the last point, another jury has also come out with a result. All the Igbos that have gone for DNA analysis, I believe I will find something to support this. All the Igbos that have gone for DNA analysis, the result that comes out is that their DNA extends the DNA, the DNA that matches their own are serially those found in what we call the Middle East. Like my own, the largest map shown, the largest of the three maps that My Heritage Incorporated shows is the one that started all the way from Mesopotamia, Iraq, Israel, Egypt. Is larger than the dot that shows Nigeria. But I also understand why it presented Nigeria having a large percentage. What it is saying is that a very huge number of the biblical Israelites are in present day Nigeria as the Igbo people. And that makes a lot of sense. Because when you look at the Igbo population, those that still identify as Igbos are 50 million. I do not know the numbers we will attach to those that identify as African Americans and Caribbeans and other countries I mentioned now. But if you are to bring all of them together, you are talking about 100 million people. So where does conversion come in? To tell the Igbos to in any way think that Igbos would legitimately convert to any religion, especially if it's an Israelite religion, is to think that people like Joshua, Samuel, Moses could convert to an Israelite religion. Somebody doesn't convert to what he is already. Thank you.
All right. All right. Are you claiming also that all Igbos or Jews are just specific groups in specific regions are connected to the original Hebrews?
All Igbos are Israelites. Our identity is Hebrew or Israelite. The identity Jew belongs to members of the house of Israel that are related to us. But it's not our identity. So to answer the question again, all Igbos, I have spent enough time on this subject that people don't doubt that I've engaged in it more than anybody alive today. I have surveyed and surveyed the Igbo landscape. Every Igbo in the world is an Israelite or a Hebrew.
Okay. All right. What role does oral tradition play, seeing so many different traditions exist in Igbo land, and how do you determine which ones are correct? Because you do have a lot of oral traditions. There's over 13 that I actually recall. And I'm trying to figure out, how do we say, hey, this one is correct, that one is not correct? How do we deal with these traditions of origins that exist all over Igbo land?
People that we could rightly call real Igbos identify with only one tradition of origin. I have been in this subject long enough to know that the only tradition of origin that is traditional to Igbos is that we came from Israel. But with the advent of Facebook, which enables everybody to publish Wikipedia, and with people becoming subject to influences that are not traditional to Igbos, I believe that some people who may be Igbos may also be imagining things that are not traditional to us. But the only tradition of origin that I know about is that we are Hebrews. And this is the only tradition of origin that matches our way of life. Because one's tradition of origin is supposed to match one's way of life. If somebody makes a claim that they have been English people for 500 years, and we do not see traces of Christianity, Anglican or Catholic, in the way of life of such a person who became English 500 years ago, we would know that the person is engaged in what Igbos call ajambene, that is cock and bull stories. The only tradition of origin which matches Igbo culture and religion, Omenana. Igbos don't have two religions and cultures. They have only one. It is called Omenana. And the Omenana was what Moses and God called the way of life of Israel. In whatever language that Moses used at Mount Sinai, in whatever language he had God speak to him, what he told the Israelites is that your way of life is Omenana. So if an Igbo is saying he came from England, he should show us traces of English culture in the Igbo religion and culture. If he's saying that Igbos came from China, we want to see Chinese culture in Igbo culture. But Igbos have maintained we are Israelites, and the Israelites or Hebrew term for religion and culture is the Igbo term for religion and culture. So we can dismiss whatever other tradition of origins that exists. We can describe them as what they are, fit for the dustbin.
I'm sure a lot of people disagree watching. But let me ask this as a follow-up question. This is from a brother who is a part of my group. He always asks this question: when do we see the first reference of Israel in the Igbo land? When do we have a recordation of this? Anybody saying that they're a part of Israel?
Certainly, nearly 400, I've seen references to seed of Abraham going back 400 years. And I don't know many other communities in the world that can come up with that. 400 years. But the most powerful is Olauda Equiano talking about He mentioned, of course, he mentioned the analogies between Igbos and Jews, but he talked about Passover. This is far more powerful than referencing to what you raised. He talked about Igbos eating bitter herbs during the Passover. I don't know if you've thought about the implications of somebody talking about the Passover 200 years ago. And somebody who was just discussing this anecdotally, he had no interest. He wasn't thinking of Aliyah. He wasn't thinking of becoming Jewish. He wasn't thinking of anything. He was only looking at similarities between Jewish practice and Igbo practice 200 years ago. But 400 years ago, people found people on the banks of the river Niger, that is Igbo land, boasting, we are seed of Abraham. And I do not know if any other group in the world, apart from the Israelites, are referred to as seed of Abraham.
Okay, so you're saying that Igbos were saying that and that's written and documented by Igbos?
No, by Westerners, by Western explorers. The book I saw was by a Western explorer, but he was citing what Igbos were saying.
Okay. Okay. All right. And that was before Christianity got there. Am I correct?
Christianity is just about 200 years old in Igbo land.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next question. As far as migration routes, how do you think the Igbos who are Jews got to Igbo land?
This is a very good question, because you managed now to separate Igbos and Jews. Because I believe that majority of the Igbos fit Hebrew, but a minority would fit the term Jewish. Because I know for a verity that some people that the identity Jewish would fit also joined other people that the identity Hebrew would fit. We essentially came in from the northern kingdom of Israel, through the southern kingdom, through Egypt, and then through the Sahara Desert. And the traces are still living till date. The old empires in West Africa, all the old empires in West Africa had Hebrew, Israelite, and Jewish communities. And the boundaries of some of them extended into Nigeria, into what we call Nigeria, because there was no Nigeria 200 years ago. And if there were Israelites all over the desert, if there were Jews all over the desert, if there were Hebrews all over the desert, and today we find a very huge number of Israelites, or with people who have said for centuries that they are Israelites, who can present culture and religion that is identical to the religion of the Israelites. It doesn't take anything for us to surmise what happened. The desert was a highway between the banks of the river Niger and the land of Israel. That's the route. That's the route which I have traveled myself. When I was beginning my research, I decided to travel that route. I got into the southern borders of Morocco. And I can't say that I found people in the desert today that we would say they have not assimilated, but the stories of Israelites having been in the desert are still being told, from what we will call northern Nigeria up to Morocco, up to Mali, Morocco, and up to Mali, Morocco, Niger, all the settlements in the routes I described.
Okay. So let me get this straight now. So what about the Nsuka find? That, I mean, I know earlier on you had George T. Baston. He was one of the proponents of the Igbos being Jews. He's one of the first that really put it down early in the 1900s. But one of the things that archaeologists found was there was an Nsuka find showing that a lot of the Igbos were actually there like 2500 BC or before there was an Israel. So how do you account for those people who predate Israel or predate Abraham, who've been living in and living in that region for that long time period? How do you account for those people?
No such archaeological discovery was made. People are simply trying to to convert their fantasies into history. For
Okay.
God's sake, these people will be the first people that will claim that, assuming anything was found at Nsoka, because nothing was found. As far as we know, nothing was found there. But assuming that anything was found at Nsoka in prehistory, somebody that is rational and normal will begin to claim they were Igbos. For God's sake, does anybody in East Africa claim that the ancestors of modern man found in East Africa are Kenyans? No, this is part of the nonsense we have to contend with every day. People who have known only defeats in their history think that the way they could be grand and great is to invent lies and pass them off as history. Abraham is regarded by historians as prehistoric, and that was about 7,000 years ago. And now we have people claiming that 25,000 years ago they were Igbos. So Igbos will simply go and get into the Guinness Book of Records. That's what it means, because I don't see any other people claiming that prehistory belongs to them. If anything was found at Nsoka, I'm not convinced anything has been found, because I don't see one notable archaeologist being associated with what you quoted. What I have come across, which I didn't bother to give attention, is some people simply engaged in fantasies, but assuming that any such thing was found. How do you connect it to the contemporary Igbos? How do you connect it?
I think how they connect it is the writing symbols. They think it's connected to the Nsibi writing, which is in the.
You see, they are simply, people are also even creating problems for the Igbos by appropriating the Nsibidi, which is not Igbo.
Mhm.
And Igbos have been in enough trouble in Nigeria that we shouldn't find the Igbos claiming the cultural heritage of others. Nsibidi belongs to the Ejagan people, not to the Igbos. But people want to be prominent at all costs, so they lie. Other Nigerians already complained that Igbos want to dominate them. And now we have Igbos lying that Nsibidi belongs to Igbos. It's not fair. We want to come to equity with clean hands. Other Nigerians already have issues with Igbos. Igbos suffered genocide. They said Igbos want to dominate them, when the reality was that Igbos were known to be hard workers. But now their claims will be justified when they begin to wake up to the fact that an Igbo woke up in the morning and began to claim that Nsibidi belongs to Igbos. Nsibidi does not belong to Igbos. And Nsibidi, the location of Nsibidi is hundreds of miles away from Nsukka.
Okay. But seeing that I'm not going to go too deep into that. But let's move on to the next question. The Obadiah Alliance's ruling on the Igbo stated that the Igbo have Y chromosomes, which reveal links with Sephardic and Ashkenazi Jews. When asked about the statement, Rabbi Demoda directed those interested to you. Can you elaborate on the wide DNA connection between Igbos and mainstream Jewish populations?
Much of my work has been based on culture, religion, and history. I have only used DNA to support what I just mentioned, I think the best person to look at the issue of the relationship between the Igbo DNA and the Jewish DNA would be the chairman of Obadiah Alliance, who has spent more time studying DNA and how it works. My interest in DNA was only to find if Igbo people's DNA matched the DNA of people who are living in the land of Israel, and it matched. And I did not go beyond that.
Okay. Because he's saying to come to you. He's saying we should go to you. That's what the person who gave me the question is saying. That's why they're asking. But let me ask you this. Let's use a simple example. Because I think in the past I do remember you referring to your personal DNA. Have you put that out in the public before, if I remember correctly? Your personal DNA?
Of course, my personal DNA is even is on the cover of one of my books. I used the map produced by my heritage to make a front cover of one of my books. So it's out in the public domain. My heritage produced a map of what they found in my DNA, and the three greatest concentrations, the three places where the greatest concentrations of my genes are found are the Levant, Nigeria, and East Africa. Of course, getting into GEDMASH and doing deeper analysis, right. I have distant cousins in Latvia.
Okay. All right. Let me see here. All right. Do you believe other groups in West Africa, such as the Iwi and the Yoruba, are also Israelites?
I don't think that belief is the right word to use.
Okay.
Because I would say that I have not studied them. I do not essentially work on beliefs. If I want to know a particular thing, I study it. I studied Yoruba history since Yorubas are my compatriots.
Yes, sir.
And Yorubas are very clear in their history about their origins, which is that everybody in the world originated from Yorubas. And Yorubas have kingdoms that have existed since more than 800 years, unbroken, which keep their traditions, and none of the kingdoms states that they have Israelite origin. So my belief is really immaterial. I'm concentrating on what their history says now, which we studied that in school. And I have come across very, very important Yorubas, like the Oni of Ife. They are laughing of Oyo. These are the two most important kings of the Yorubas. They say that the Igbos are Israelites. They don't say that they are Israelites. And that is that. Then as for the Ewe, they are not Nigerians. So I have not had the opportunity to study their history in depth. I'm not a specialist in that.
Okay. All right. That's good. All right. Ethiopian Jews, what are your thoughts on their origin and the history attached to these particular Jews?
I have done enough work on Jewish culture that showed me a connection between Ethiopian Jewish culture and Igbo Jewish culture. And the Igbo Israelite culture. For example, the Igbo people would not give a decent or regular burial to a person that commits suicide. The Igbos will never do that. If an Igbo person takes the life, the Igbos will not accord that person a regular Igbo burial. Fortunately, this was written in Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. Because even though it is Igbo tradition, which no Igbo would doubt, I have a reason for being emphatic on this point, and allow me to be.
Mm-hmm.
Even the Igbos that talk about Nsukka and in CBD, they would not doubt that if an Igbo takes the life, that Igbo is not accorded a regular burial. And this is Igbo tradition. And this is Israelite tradition. And this is not Yoruba tradition. This is not Yoruba tradition. To the Yorubas, there is a time it is okay to commit suicide. So, the Igbos that are finding other traditions of origins for Igbos, going to Nsukka, claiming that archaeology discovered this or that, would not doubt this. But because we have people who cannot be held accountable, we may have people saying, or people who cannot bother to ask an Igbo, is this Igbo tradition? So we are fortunate that Chinua Achebe wrote about this tradition in 1959. How many years is 1959 now? 63 years. 64 years.
64 years, right?
64 years. Achebe published Things Fall Apart. An Igbo person committed suicide by hanging himself. The Igbos told the colonial authorities, you have stopped us from giving this man a good burial because you forced him to take his life. This is quintessentially an Israelite tradition. It is found in Ethiopian Jewish culture. In their cemeteries in Ethiopia, if an Ethiopian Jew takes the life, they don't mourn him. They bury him outside the graveyard. So, the culture tells me that they and the Igbos drew from one source.
Interesting.
It is the culture that tells me this. I rely on history, but I rely more on culture because culture is more infallible. Culture is more reliable than even history.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to something that's very important, circumcision. Circumcision is used as a main reason for a connection to Jews. What about the traditions of female circumcision and male circumcision, dates fluctuating between 1 and 8 days or even older? What do you feel about that as far as circumcision and the Igbo?
Among the Igbo. Huh?
Yes, among the Igbo, yes.
Of course, the male circumcision is universal. I don't think there is anybody, again, doubting that it's universal among the Igbo. And by the way, not universal in Africa. Not universal in Africa or West Africa. Not common. Because I've seen writings that say that is common in Africa. Of course, it's not. We grew up in Africa. We know that majority of the people don't circumcise their males. Traditionally. So, then the female circumcision, what I will do is a guess. It's an assimilated tradition. Or maybe a carryover from the Semitic phobia of the Israelite culture. Because we tend to forget that Israelite culture did not fall from the tree. It also came from a tradition. And I don't know if the Semites were circumcising women. If it's not something we carried over from our Semitic past, then it's something that we assimilated from our neighbors. Because for God's sake, everybody assimilates. I know Jewish friends who lived under communism in Europe, in the Soviet Union, who were not circumcised at all.
Okay, that's a good point. All right. As we move forward
because the general European culture of not circumcising influenced them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So as we are you finished? Are you finished, Mr. Yona? Because we
Yes,
got
I
to chat up a little bit. Okay. All right. As we move forward in 2023, what are your hopes for the future of Igbos and Igbo Jews and moving back to Israel? Is there any plans to do like a mass migration to Israel? Is there anything being proposed as far as going back to Israel?
our plans. I'm talking about men and the defenders, the group and its Secretary General and Chairman of the Elders Council, the group that has dedicated its time, its resources, and made it its mission to rebuild, to heal, to rehabilitate the Igbo people. Our primary focus is to rebuild the Hebrew Igbo republics.
Okay. Beautiful.
To rebuild the Hebrew Igbo republics. We do not have anything against anybody that wants to go anywhere. But our goal is to rebuild, rehabilitate the 16,000 miles of territory that God gave us in West Africa that you may call Igbo land today, where we built a Hebrew civilization that had no prostitutes, no destitutes, no prisons. Of course, we know that these things were what obtained there. But very importantly, these things were noted by the colonialists who were oppressing us. When the British came to West Africa, many of their writers noted that among the Igbo people, they generally called us Igbo. There were no prostitutes, there were no destitutes, and we know there were no prisons and kings. And these republics lasted for over 500 years. And when what I described to you were not found among Igbos, they were found in other parts of what became Nigeria. They were found in Europe. If you read Oliver Twist, the orphans were mistreated by his time in England. But in England, in Igbo land, the orphans were taken care of. Our mission is to rebuild it and to rebuild our diaspora. There are Igbos in every corner of the world today. Our goal is to bring them up, rehabilitate them, revive them, that they will be a light to the world. When this is done, when we have achieved this to an appreciable extent, we are ready to engage with related peoples about how to centralize the Israelite culture, because it has a lot to offer the world. And fortunately, while we've had the Torah, we are now having the source that the Torah cites. That is Omenana. That is the Igbo history, religion. I mean, that is the Igbo culture and religion.
Okay.
As I mentioned in my last interview with Ashriel, Ben Israel of the African Hebrew Israelites of Jerusalem, there are parts of Israelite culture that you must understand the Igbo culture to understand. I give an example. When the writers of the Hebrew Bible said Haran died in the face of the Father, to know what the Hebrew Bible, what the writers of the Hebrew Bible meant, you must know what the Igbos understand that phrase to mean. If you don't know what the Igbos understand that phrase to mean, you can never understand what it means for somebody to die in the face of the Father. You must, I'm not saying you may, You must know what the Igbos understand that phrase to mean. He died in the face of the Father. Haran was the brother of Abraham. The writers of the Hebrew Bible said he died in the face of the Father. Get every Bible you can lay your hands on. Look at all the commentaries in Hebrew and English. He died in the face of the Father remains not understood until you ask the Igbos, what does it mean when somebody dies in the face of the Father? Ihu is face. If somebody dies while the Father is alive, the lineage of the person that dies while the Father is alive loses the right of succeeding the Father if that person that died was the first son. I'm going to talk about this soon because it gives us an idea, a clue, that Abraham's priesthood is logical. Because I suspect that Haran was the first son of that gentleman. But after he died, logically Abraham became the successor to their father. So even though he was given a different culture, which he became a priest of, but he also was a priest in his father's house. Thank you.
All right. All right. I was going to ask you what you're currently working on, but you basically elaborated on all of that when you spoke about Israel and the group of folks in Igbo land. Let's get back to, I got 3 more questions and then we're done. As I said, I only wanted to do 45 minutes. I didn't want to make it a lengthy interview for hours and so forth. Is it true that Igbos had a 4-day week traditionally? And as far as holy days, do you see any Jewish connection with the holy days or holidays that the Igbos practice in modern times?
In the first, to respond to the first question, Igbos did not have a 4-day week. What Igbos did was what everybody in the world did. There was a time up to Egypt, up to Iraq, up to Europe. Markets were revolving every 4 days. If people remove their produce from the land, from the ground, they have to have markets that come around often, so that those produce will not decay. Like assuming you remove lettuce from your farm and there is no market, the lettuce will spoil, it will decay. So what some people have chosen to call weeks are those 4 market days that revolve round and round and round. But refer to most older books about culture in most parts of the world, some have 3. Some have markets that come around every 3 days. Some have that come around every 5 days. Some have markets that come around every 4 days. These are not weeks. Ancient man did not have a notion of weeks as we have them today until the Roman culture permeated the world. And we have this current calendar we call Julian or Gregorian calendar.
Gregorian, right?
Yeah. That answers the first question. The second question is, of course, starting from the most common, the Sabbath, up to today, in my own republic, you cannot walk. You cannot walk on Ekuku on Poru Day. The community will stop you. The only things done on Ekuku on Poru are making merry, soft merry with your kinsmen. You go to the Obi. If you have palm wine, you share with your brothers and with your brothers. The women are in the house. The men are in the Obi. No funerals, no wedding, no going to the market, no going to the farm on Nkworu and the Keuku days. This is just one. I talked about Sabbath, which is the most common. Then, of course, we allowed the Piano 200 years ago mentioned the Passover. That's a feast. Sukkot, Imantu. Of course, oh sure. So we have the feast days, the biblical feast days, the ones you find in the Torah. We have them, and the Jews have them too. since you are interested in the connection between our feast days and Jewish feast days.
Okay. All right. Well, not the final question, but do you see a connection with the Lemba Jews, the Ethiopian Jews, and the Igbo Jews? Do you see any form of connection with all those three groups?
You see, I think inadvertently you frame the question perfectly. Yes, there are Igbos that are practicing Judaism. They are the Igbo Jews. So these Igbos that are practicing Judaism, I believe that they are developing connections with Lemba that are practicing Judaism, with Ethiopians that are practicing Judaism. So there are connections. But if you are talking about the Hebrew nation, which you can also call the Igbo nation, there is no connection, there is no contact yet with the Lemba or with the Ethiopian. But I hope you know that there was diplomatic relations between the Igbo nation and the state of Israel. Full diplomatic relations. Something bigger than normal diplomatic relations. Up to 1970.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So my final question is, based on all your years involved with this study, have you any doubts on your source and your information as far as Igbos being Jews? Have you ever had any doubts of your information?
I have never doubted that Igbos are Igbos. How can I doubt that Igbos are Igbos? It will be tantamount to my doubting that Remy is Remy. I live as a Hebrew. That is what I live as. When my children came into the world, I circumcised the boy on the 8th day. Their mother went into seclusion. My wife went into seclusion for 3 months. This is what Hebrews do, or this is what Hebrews did. So why would I be in any doubt? I've never entertained any doubt. Why should I? When I know that if I open my mouth and utter 20 Igbo words, up to 8 of them may have Hebrew words that are almost the same thing in spelling and sound. So why would there be room for doubts?
Mm-hmm. All right. Hey, Remy Ilona, I want to say thank you for coming through, man. You've been wonderful, and we went overtime actually because I wanted to do 45 minutes. But let me ask you this: would you be willing to do a panel discussion? Because I do want to incorporate an African connection, a Caribbean connection, and an African American connection, where those who are claiming they're Igbos and those who are claiming that they follow a Hebraic tradition could all converse on this great topic here that we're talking about today, because it's a very important topic and a lot of people are involved in it, whether they agree or whether they're skeptical about the whole conversation or not. And I wanted to bring this to the community so that folks, I didn't want to be adversarial or even push you in a certain direction, because I wanted the family to see you in the light that you're pushing and why you're pushing it. And to me, you are genuine. You're not somebody who's just saying, hey, you woke up one day and say, hey, I'm a Hebrew. I think you're culturally making the connection. I think you're trying your best to encourage folks who have Igbo backgrounds to look into this more. And I don't have a problem with that, because you're actually doing the work. So I must commend you on that. All right. And again, I must say thank you for taking out the time. We've been trying to do this for months, but scheduling issues and so forth. And I do appreciate you taking the time out today. I want to say thank you.
Thank you too. Of course, with the parameters you mentioned, Igbos, African Americans, and Caribbeans who believe they are descended from Igbos, sure, I will be willing to talk to them. I will be willing to be in a panel with them, because I believe that we need to talk more. We need to expand outreach. We need to talk more. We need to have more conversation. we need to create fora for everybody to bring what they have on the table. That is the only way we could grow, rebuild our communities. So I'm your guest anytime you bring that up.
Yes, sir. I want to say again, thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Remy Ilona. Peace and love to y'all. Peace.
Thank you.